Today we are going to look at the worst deaths recorded, from filming your last breath in front of thousands of people, to using your privilege ending in a horrible sight. Let's dive straight into it. It was March 15th, 2016, when 24-year-old Grant Hollister made what would become his final live stream from an abandoned grain elevator in Detroit, Michigan. The freelance photographer had built a reputation exploring forgotten industrial sites across the Midwest, documenting urban decay for his YouTube channel and its 4,000 devoted subscribers. Grant possessed the kind of fearless personality that made him perfect for urban exploration. His meticulous planning had safely guided him through over 200 abandoned structures, from crumbling factories to derelict hospitals. Each expedition was carefully researched, with backup plans and professional climbing equipment, ensuring his safety. The Detroit grain elevator had been on his target list for months, a 12-story concrete monument to industrial decline that promised spectacular footage. Arriving in the early afternoon on an overcast Tuesday, Grant carried his usual arsenal of cameras, climbing gear, and emergency supplies. The building loomed before him like a brutalist sculpture, its weathered concrete walls telling stories of Detroit's manufacturing heyday. He began his live stream shortly after arrival, showing viewers the deteriorated exterior while explaining his planned route to the summit. The first several floors went flawlessly. Grant navigated crumbling staircases and debris-filled corridors with practiced ease, maintaining constant commentary about the building's history and architectural details. His audience watched as he documented layers of graffiti and structural damage, each floor revealing new evidence of decades of abandonment. Everything changed when Grant reached the upper levels. He discovered a section where the concrete flooring had partially collapsed, creating a jagged 6-foot-wide hole surrounded by twisted rebar. Attempting to position his camera for a dramatic shot of the void below, he stepped backward onto what appeared to be solid concrete flooring. The century-old structure had other plans. The weakened concrete gave way instantly, sending Grant plummeting 90 feet through multiple floors of twisted metal and concrete debris. His body struck protruding steel beams twice during the horrific descent, causing massive internal trauma and multiple compound fractures. The sickening impacts echoed through the empty building as his equipment scattered around his motionless form. The live stream feed continued for several moments, showing only the aftermath, the camera swinging wildly, a blur of debris, and finally, a horrifying silence. Viewers watched helplessly as the scene unfolded, realizing something terrible had happened. The chat exploded with desperate messages as people tried to contact emergency services from across the country. First responders arrived within half an hour, but it was far too late. Grant was pronounced dead at the scene from massive internal bleeding and traumatic brain injury. The very technology that had made him famous had captured his final moments, not in words but in stark, tragic visual evidence. It was August 7th, 2017, when 31-year-old Melinda Cross turned her Phoenix kitchen into a death trap during what should have been a routine cooking live stream. The former restaurant manager had successfully transitioned from the high-pressure world of professional kitchens to food blogging, building her cooking channel to 5,000 devoted followers who loved her bubbly personality and innovative fusion recipes. Melinda's infectious enthusiasm made even the most complex dishes seem approachable. Her background managing a busy southwestern restaurant had given her the technical skills and confidence to attempt challenging cooking methods, particularly high-heat techniques and dramatic flambeing presentations that made for compelling content. She had spent years perfecting these skills in professional kitchens, making her upcoming demonstrations seem routine. The fatal evening was meant to showcase her signature Phoenix Fire fajitas, featuring a tableside flambe that had become her trademark dish. Melinda had prepared extensively, arranging her main camera in her home kitchen and pre-measuring all ingredients. The centerpiece of her preparation was a bottle of high-proof rum, essential for creating the dramatic flames that would give the dish its name. That evening, Melinda began streaming to over 1,000 live viewers, her characteristic cheerfulness immediately evident as she greeted her audience and began preparing vegetables and marinating chicken. Everything proceeded perfectly as she demonstrated knife techniques and explained her fusion approach to traditional Mexican cuisine. The disaster began when Melinda started the flambe sequence. She poured rum over the sizzling chicken and vegetables in her large cast-iron skillet, the alcohol immediately beginning to steam from the intense heat. When she attempted to ignite the mixture with a long lighter, the flame traveled up the stream of rum still flowing from the bottle in her hand. The glass bottle cracked from the sudden heat, sending burning alcohol across Melinda's upper body and immediately igniting her loose cotton blouse. Within seconds, she was engulfed in flames from her waist up, suffering severe burns across her torso and arms. Her agonized screams filled the kitchen as she stumbled backward in panic. The situation escalated when Melinda knocked over a container of cooking oil during her desperate attempts to extinguish the flames. The oil spread fire across nearby surfaces, creating additional hazards as smoke rapidly filled the small kitchen space. Viewers watched in horror through the increasingly obscured camera feed as emergency calls flooded local dispatch. The live stream feed cut out within 90 seconds as smoke and heat overwhelmed the equipment. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes of the first 911 calls from viewers, but found Melinda unconscious from smoke inhalation and severe burns. She died en route to the hospital from respiratory failure and burns covering over 50% of her body. The incident sent shockwaves through the cooking content community. The brief but horrific footage, viewed by hundreds of thousands before removal, sparked widespread discussions about cooking safety and social media content creation. Phoenix Fire Department responded by offering free cooking safety seminars specifically targeted at content creators, emphasizing the unique dangers of performing for cameras. Melinda's family established a foundation promoting kitchen safety education for content creators, working with culinary schools to develop guidelines for safe filming practices. The tragedy highlighted how the pressure to create compelling content can lead to fatal miscalculations, even for experienced cooks in familiar environments. Today, Melinda's story serves as a sobering reminder that fire safety protocols become even more critical when performing for an audience, and that even routine cooking techniques carry deadly risks when proper precautions are ignored. It was June 22, 2015, when 28-year-old Tristan Avery prepared for what would become his final wingsuit flight from the towering sandstone cliffs of Moab, Utah. The professional extreme sports athlete and stunt coordinator had built his reputation on pushing boundaries, accumulating over 400 successful jumps from locations worldwide, while amassing 3,000 followers across multiple social media platforms. Tristan possessed the kind of confident, risk-taking personality that made him a natural for extreme sports. His background as a stunt coordinator for action films had given him meticulous attention to safety protocols, even while pursuing increasingly dangerous challenges. The Moab location was one of his favorites, a 1,400-foot sandstone cliff formation that offered spectacular footage and challenging flight lines through the desert landscape. Weather conditions were absolutely perfect that morning, with minimal wind and crystal-clear visibility stretching across the Utah desert. Tristan had spent the previous day testing his equipment and studying wind patterns, confident that everything was aligned for another successful jump to add to his growing video collection. That morning, Tristan began his live stream with thousands of viewers watching as he conducted his pre-flight equipment check. He spent considerable time demonstrating his wingsuit, parachute system, and backup safety devices while hiking to the jump point, his enthusiasm infectious as he explained the technical aspects of the planned flight. Positioning himself at the cliff edge at 12:15, Tristan made his final preparations with the practiced efficiency of a seasoned professional. The jump began flawlessly, his wingsuit deployed correctly as he achieved the perfect gliding position, soaring through the desert air like a human bird of prey. For nearly a minute, everything went according to plan. Tristan maintained perfect form as he glided away from the cliff face, his helmet-mounted camera capturing the breathtaking landscape rushing past below. At approximately 1,200 feet above the desert floor, he began preparing for his planned parachute deployment. Then disaster struck without warning. A sudden violent downdraft caught his wingsuit with tremendous force, throwing him into an uncontrolled tumble that no amount of experience could have anticipated. The chaotic rotation made it impossible to maintain proper body position as he spun helplessly through the air, rapidly losing the altitude needed for safe parachute deployment. Fighting against the disorienting spin, Tristan managed to deploy his main parachute approximately 400 feet above the desert floor. However, the violent rotation had twisted his body position, causing the parachute lines to wrap around his torso and legs. The chute deployed partially but became fatally compromised, providing insufficient lift to slow his descent. With limited altitude remaining, Tristan attempted to deploy his reserve parachute, but the tangled main chute lines prevented proper deployment. The reserve opened partially, but couldn't generate enough drag to save him from the rapidly approaching desert floor. Tristan struck the hard-packed earth at devastating speed, suffering massive trauma that proved instantly fatal. His helmet-mounted camera was damaged on impact, but had captured the entire sequence leading up to the accident. Emergency responders reached the remote location within an hour, guided by GPS coordinates from concerned viewers who had witnessed the live stream. The footage became crucial evidence in an investigation that revealed how the unusual downdraft conditions had created a perfect storm of circumstances beyond any pilot's control. The tragedy prompted renewed focus on extreme sports safety protocols. The wingsuit community implemented enhanced weather monitoring requirements and improved training for handling emergency situations at low altitudes. Tristan's death led to a better understanding of desert cliff wind patterns and mandatory safety briefings that have since helped other pilots recognize and avoid similar conditions. The Moab wingsuit community honors Tristan's memory with improved safety standards while continuing to pursue the sport he loved, always mindful that even perfect conditions can change in an instant. It was October 13, 2018, when 19-year-old Courtney Blake climbed to the rooftop of an abandoned factory in Cleveland, Ohio, for what would become her final social media stunt. The college sophomore studying marketing had built a following of 4,000 Instagram followers through increasingly dangerous challenges and stunts that showcased her outgoing personality and fearless approach to viral content creation. Courtney's willingness to attempt any trending challenge had made her incredibly popular among teenage followers who eagerly awaited her next death-defying post. Her previous rooftop photography sessions across Cleveland had garnered thousands of views, each location more dangerous than the last. The abandoned 6-story brick factory represented the ultimate prize, a building scheduled for demolition that would provide the perfect backdrop for her planned final rooftop series. She arrived with her boyfriend Jake, who served as her cameraman and safety spotter for these dangerous shoots. The century-old factory loomed before them, its deteriorating brick facade and broken windows creating an apocalyptic atmosphere that would photograph beautifully against the overcast autumn sky. That afternoon, Courtney began live streaming to 1,800 viewers, showing the building's imposing exterior while explaining her planned route to the roof. The climb took considerable time through deteriorated stairwells filled with debris and broken glass, Jake following closely behind with backup camera equipment. Reaching the rooftop, Courtney immediately began attempting various poses near the building's edge. Her audience watched as she performed handstands dangerously close to the 6-story drop, each stunt more reckless than the last. The crumbling brick ledge showed obvious signs of deterioration, but Courtney's focus remained on creating the perfect shot. For her finale, she decided to recreate a viral challenge that involved hanging from the building's edge by her fingertips, a stunt that had already claimed several lives across social media platforms. Despite Jake's visible nervousness, Courtney positioned herself at the ledge, gripping the weathered brick with both hands. As she lowered herself over the edge, her 115-pound weight proved too much for the century-old masonry. The brick ledge crumbled instantly, sending chunks of debris cascading toward the concrete loading dock 60 feet below. Courtney followed seconds later, her terrified scream echoing across the empty industrial district. The impact against the concrete was devastating. Courtney suffered severe skull fractures, complete spinal cord severing, and massive internal bleeding that ended her life instantly. Jake's anguished screams and frantic attempts to call for help were broadcast live for several minutes before he managed to end the stream, but the damage was already done. Paramedics arrived within 20 minutes of the fall, but Courtney was pronounced dead at the scene. The live stream footage, viewed by hundreds of thousands before removal, showed every horrific detail of her final moments, traumatizing viewers worldwide and sparking immediate controversy about social media's influence on dangerous behavior. The incident ignited nationwide discussions about platform responsibility and the pressure young people face to create increasingly dangerous content for online fame. Cleveland authorities responded by implementing stricter penalties for trespassing in abandoned buildings and increasing security patrols around known social media hotspots. Courtney's parents channeled their grief into advocacy work, becoming prominent voices for social media safety education and platform accountability for dangerous content. The factory where Courtney died has been demolished, but her story continues to serve as a cautionary tale about the deadly intersection of social media fame and teenage risk-taking behavior in America's digital age. It was January 28, 2017, when 35-year-old Derek Langston fired up his live stream for what would become his final automotive repair demonstration in his Bakersfield, California auto shop. The small business owner had built a loyal following of 3,000 subscribers who tuned into his educational streams, drawn to his methodical personality and ability to explain complex mechanical procedures in simple terms. Derek's 15 years of mechanical experience had earned him a reputation as one of Bakersfield's most trusted mechanics. His decision to live-stream his work had proven brilliant for business, attracting customers who appreciated his transparent approach and educational content. Unlike flashy automotive YouTubers, Derek focused on real-world repairs that everyday drivers could relate to. The fatal day involved diagnosing and repairing a lifted pickup truck with suspected transmission problems. The 7,000-pound vehicle required Derek to work underneath it, a routine procedure he had performed hundreds of times throughout his career. His hydraulic lift system had been recently inspected and showed no signs of wear. That afternoon, Derek started his stream with several hundred live viewers watching as he explained the truck's symptoms and his diagnostic plan. His methodical approach was immediately evident as he walked viewers through proper lift procedures, emphasizing safety checks that many mechanics skip in their daily routines. For the better part of an hour, everything proceeded normally. Derek demonstrated proper lifting techniques, explained the truck's four-wheel drive system, and showed viewers how to identify transmission problems through visual inspection and fluid analysis. His audience appreciated the educational value as he prepared to remove the transmission. Later in the stream, Derek positioned himself underneath the raised truck to begin the transmission removal process. The massive vehicle loomed above him, supported by hydraulic cylinders that had never failed in his shop's 10-year history. As he worked to disconnect transmission lines, he noticed hydraulic fluid beginning to leak from the primary lift cylinder. Instead of immediately lowering the vehicle and investigating the leak, Derek made a fatal decision. Confident in his experience and eager to complete the repair for his audience, he attempted to tighten the hydraulic fitting while remaining underneath the truck. The compromised hydraulic seal had other plans. The seal failed catastrophically without warning. The lift dropped instantly, bringing 7,000 pounds of steel crashing down onto Derek's chest and abdomen. The impact caused immediate massive internal trauma, crushing his ribcage and rupturing vital organs, while pinning him helplessly beneath the vehicle. Derek's legs and arms remained visible to the camera, continuing to move for a brief time as he struggled beneath the crushing weight. The live stream captured his muffled cries for help and the sound of his increasingly labored breathing as internal bleeding and organ failure took their toll. A customer who heard the commotion immediately called 911, but Derek's injuries were beyond medical intervention. He died from crushing injuries and massive internal bleeding within minutes of the lift failure. His final breaths broadcast live to hundreds of horrified viewers. The incident triggered immediate industry-wide safety reviews. OSHA investigators discovered that the hydraulic seal failure resulted from a known manufacturing defect that had affected dozens of similar lift systems nationwide. New regulations emerged, requiring redundant safety systems for automotive lifts used in filmed content. Derek's family received a substantial settlement from the lift manufacturer, which they used to establish a foundation promoting automotive safety education. Today, his tragedy serves as a reminder that equipment failures can strike without warning. It was September 4, 2016, when 26-year-old Angela Rowe arrived at Yellowstone National Park's Norris Geyser Basin for what would become her final wildlife biology research expedition. The graduate student had built her wild science channel to 5,000 followers through her patient, scientific personality and genuine passion for conservation education, making complex ecological concepts accessible to viewers worldwide. Angela's academic background in wildlife biology had given her extensive experience with extreme environments, particularly thermal features where unique microbial life thrived in conditions that would kill most organisms. Her thesis research focused on thermal pool ecosystems, and she had obtained special permits to film in Yellowstone's restricted areas for educational content. The Norris Geyser Basin represented the perfect location for her research, known for having some of the hottest thermal features in the park, with temperatures regularly exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Angela was particularly excited about documenting a newly formed hot spring that had appeared following recent seismic activity in the region. That morning, Angela began streaming to nearly 900 live viewers, explaining thermal pool formation and the remarkable extremophile organisms that somehow managed to survive in these hellish conditions. Her enthusiasm was infectious, as she described the delicate mineral formations and rainbow-colored bacterial mats that created Yellowstone's otherworldly landscape. For over an hour, Angela safely documented various pools while maintaining proper distances and following park safety protocols to the letter. Her scientific approach impressed viewers as she explained the chemistry behind the superheated water and acidic conditions that made these features so dangerous to human life. Later in her stream, she approached the newly formed thermal pool to collect water samples for her research. The pool appeared stable, surrounded by what looked like solid mineral crust that had formed over months of thermal activity. Angela positioned her sampling equipment carefully, following procedures she had used successfully countless times before. The thin mineral crust had other plans. As Angela leaned forward to collect her sample, the seemingly solid ground gave way under her weight, sending her tumbling backward into the 185-degree acidic water with a splash that would haunt viewers forever. The superheated water immediately began causing devastating chemical and thermal burns to over 80% of her body. The acidic composition, similar to battery acid, ate through her clothing and skin, while the extreme temperature caused instant third-degree burns that penetrated to the bone. Angela's agonized screams lasted briefly before shock and respiratory failure from inhaling superheated steam rendered her unconscious. The thermal pool's acidic water continued its deadly work, even as she floated motionless, her body chemistry unable to cope with the extreme conditions. Park rangers arrived quickly after receiving emergency calls from horrified viewers, but safety protocols prevented immediate extraction from the acidic pool. The water's extreme temperature and chemical composition made rescue attempts impossible without specialized equipment. Angela was pronounced dead at the scene from severe thermal burns, chemical burns, and respiratory failure. The incident led to increased safety barriers and warning systems around Yellowstone's thermal features. New regulations were implemented requiring additional safety equipment and mandatory spotters for all research filming in thermal areas. Angela's research was completed posthumously by her colleagues and contributed to important discoveries about extremophile organisms, ensuring that her scientific legacy would continue advancing human understanding of life in extreme conditions. These tragic moments remind us how quickly things can go wrong. It was December 2nd, 2017, in Fresno, California. A local TV crew set up outside a corner convenience store in the evening. The reporter held a microphone while shoppers moved in and out behind them. Sarah Gomez was 29. She worked as a waitress at a roadside restaurant off Highway 99. She often picked up double shifts to help her younger brother. In late November, she won $150,000 in a state lottery. The station planned a short feature at the store where she had bought the ticket. She signed a release form and waited on the sidewalk while the crew adjusted the light. The segment covered basic questions about her win and plans. Sarah stood holding a large check, saying she would use the money for her brother's college costs. Neighbors later said she had told several people this same plan. As the camera filmed, a man in a hooded sweatshirt walked into the picture in the background. He kept his head down and moved slowly along the storefront. He looked at Sarah instead of the camera. He stopped near a newspaper stand about 15 feet away and stood there. A person watching later said he looked like he did not belong and was just staring at her. The reporter finished the interview in one take. The crew shot a few extra clips and packed their gear. The package aired during the early evening news. Producers later looked at the tape again and used a circle to point out the hooded man in the background. The station posted the segment to its website and social media page. The comments filled up with congratulations and short messages from people who said they had eaten at the restaurant where Sarah worked. Sarah returned to her apartment a few hours after the interview. It was a small complex with 2 floors, an outside staircase, and numbered doors facing a parking lot. Around 9:30 p.m., neighbors heard a loud argument near her front door. A woman screamed. A short struggle followed with a sound like something hitting the doorframe. One neighbor stepped into the walkway and saw a hooded man run down the stairs and cross the lot quickly. 2 911 calls came in seconds apart. Operators sent police and paramedics. Officers arrived to find the front door partly open and footprints on the stairs. Sarah lay on the floor in the entryway with multiple stab wounds. Her purse and keys were missing. Paramedics put pressure bandages on her wounds, gave her oxygen, and moved her to a stretcher. She was taken to the nearest hospital and was declared dead shortly after arrival. Police put tape around the stairwell and took photos of the scene. They collected a broken plastic key tag from the walkway and took a sample from a smear on the handrail. Detectives went through the complex and took statements from neighbors who had seen the man run away. They also asked for the TV station's raw footage, including the full take of the interview and any wide shots taken before and after. Investigators compared the broadcast clip with security video from the convenience store. The hooded man's shoes and jacket appeared in both. A second camera down the block showed the same figure waiting near a bus bench as the crew packed up. Detectives asked for more footage from nearby businesses along the route to Sarah's home. A clip from a pharmacy parking lot recorded a hooded man running past about an hour before the 911 calls. Tips came in after the station re-aired the interview with the circled figure. One caller gave a name and car description. Officers found the vehicle and watched it for days. When the driver returned, detectives saw a matching jacket and got a search warrant. The suspect was arrested weeks later. Police found Sarah's key tag and purse parts in his home. A pocket knife with apparent blood traces was sent to the lab. The police chief warned that routine news stories could draw dangerous attention and asked the media to protect Winner's privacy. Sarah's funeral was held the following week with co-workers, customers, and her brother attending. For viewers who watched the story, one image remained: a woman holding a giant check on a sidewalk, and a man in a hood standing close enough to see, close enough to follow. It was January 4th, 2016 in Jacksonville, Florida. The holiday season had just ended, and people were getting back to normal routines. In one quiet neighborhood, a rented house stood out with music playing through open windows as people gathered for a small party. For them, it was just another night. For one woman, it was the night everything changed. Angela Ruiz was 32 years old, working as a cashier and raising 2 children by herself. In December, she had won $50,000 on a scratch-off lottery ticket, more money than she had ever held at one time. With the money, she rented a bigger house and bought new furniture. Neighbors said she seemed proud of the place but noticed the stress of work and family never went away. She kept the same habits, including smoking late at night on the porch. That evening, Angela invited friends over. They sat in the living room talking and laughing with cigarettes, candles burning on tables, and drinks spread around. No one thought much about having open flames and cigarettes in the same room. Around midnight, strange sounds broke the quiet neighborhood. A neighbor heard a popping noise like glass breaking, then saw orange light in a front window. Within minutes, flames spread inside the living room with smoke rising and crackling wood getting louder. Another neighbor heard a woman's voice calling for her children. Inside, Angela's 2 kids were able to escape through a side window. They crawled out as smoke filled the rooms behind them. Neighbors ran toward the house, shouting and pointing as flames got higher. One friend outside saw Angela stop near the doorway before she went back inside. He told investigators later that she went back for a box. He had yelled at her not to go back. The box held documents and cash she had saved since winning the lottery. Within 2 to 3 minutes, the rooms filled with thick smoke. It became almost impossible to see. Anyone inside would have had trouble breathing. From outside, neighbors said they could no longer see past the doorway as the fire spread upward. Fire trucks arrived within minutes. Crews forced open the door despite intense heat and poor visibility. Inside, they found Angela at the bottom of the stairs, overcome by thick smoke before she could reach the door. She was carried outside on a stretcher, while crews continued fighting the fire. Paramedics gave her oxygen and rushed her to the nearest hospital. Despite their efforts, Angela was declared dead shortly after arrival from smoke inhalation and burns. In the days that followed, the community came together. Angela's funeral was held at a small church with family, neighbors, and co-workers attending. People collected donations to support the children, who now faced life without their mother. Fire investigators found the cause was a candle that had been knocked over in the living room, with cigarette butts nearby that may have made it worse. Officials reminded people to never leave candles alone and keep them away from things that could catch fire. For neighbors who had seen the orange light that night, the memory stayed clear. What began as a celebration in a newly rented home turned into chaos with smoke, fire trucks, and police tape. Angela Ruiz's story showed how quickly a small mistake could destroy everything, even after the good luck of a winning ticket. It was July 8, 2017 in Flint, Michigan. Backyards on the block were busy with weekend sounds, as relatives gathered at one small house carrying food for a simple cookout. Robert Lane, called Bobby, was 56 years old and had retired from the Postal Service after decades on the same mail route. In late 2016, he won $100,000 in the state lottery. He used the money to pay off debts, replace his roof, and take relatives out to dinner more often. Neighbors called him the lucky one because he kept his life steady. As months went by, a few relatives began asking for loans more often, bringing up his lottery win at nearly every visit. That Saturday, Bobby set out folding tables and hung lights on the fence while a cousin handled the grill. By late evening, the air was still and warm. A neighbor heard music and laughter from across the alley. Just after sunset, Bobby raised a glass and made a toast about the lottery paying for one more round, like he had done a few times since winning. Midway through the evening, the mood on the patio changed. Bobby was sitting at the picnic table with his glass in hand when he leaned forward. He put one hand on the wood table. People who saw what happened said he grabbed at his stomach like he was trying to steady himself. His face went pale very quickly. A relative at the table asked if he needed to lie down. Someone reached for a chair. He let out a low sound and dropped to one knee. A neighbor who rushed through the gate later told police that Bobby kept saying his insides were burning. The people closest to him called 911 and tried to keep him sitting up. Someone brought a wet towel from the kitchen. He started breathing hard and then slower. Within a couple of minutes, he was lying on his side on the grass. He was not able to stand. The family moved the picnic table back to give space. A cousin waved at the street to signal the ambulance. Paramedics arrived within minutes and walked straight into the yard with a monitor and medical bags. One checked his breathing, while another asked about any known health problems or allergies. They started giving him oxygen and put in an IV. They recorded his vital signs. His pulse was fast but weak. He was put onto a stretcher and moved to the ambulance while a relative rode in the front. The lights turned the yard red and white as the ambulance drove away. At the hospital, a team met the ambulance and took him to a treatment room. Staff put him on monitors, gave him fluids, and ran tests. He had survived the trip, but his condition worsened at the hospital. Despite several hours of treatment, he died later that night. A detective then arrived to begin standard questions for an unexpected death. Word of what happened moved fast on the block the next morning. A few chairs and the tent still stood in the yard. Paper plates had blown to one corner by the wind. Family came and went through the day. By midweek, an obituary posted the funeral details at a church a few miles away. Bobby's funeral was held the following week in Flint. Dozens of postal workers, neighbors, and relatives filled the seats. There was a line of people waiting to sign the guest book. The service was short. Afterward, the family received food and cards from visitors in the fellowship hall. Investigators confirmed that tests showed Bobby's drink had been mixed with antifreeze, likely in a sweet drink where the taste could be hidden. A cousin who had been asking him for money became the focus. Officers collected evidence and the cousin was arrested on suspicion of poisoning. Police warned that sudden cash can change how people around a winner act and told residents to be careful about food and drinks during gatherings. On the block where the cookout took place, neighbors went back to weekend chores. The only sign of that Saturday night was a small patch of flattened grass where the picnic table had stood. Bobby Lane's win was still a topic on the street, but it was no longer a happy one. It was June 3, 2017 in Macon, Georgia. The neighborhood was quiet on that Saturday evening with families on porches and kids riding bikes. On one corner lot stood a small home with boxes stacked near the windows as relatives and friends prepared to help with upcoming repairs. The house belonged to Sheila Grant, a 43-year-old school secretary who had worked at the same elementary school for nearly 20 years. A year earlier, she won $3 million in the state lottery, choosing yearly payments of about $120,000 after taxes. She planned to use most of it for her 2 grown children and grandchildren. Sheila did not live in a fancy way. She kept her small car and continued working part-time at the school. She stayed in the same house she had lived in for years. With her winnings, she was saving for a repair project that would update her kitchen and replace the old siding on the house. Friends said she stayed modest, but people around her noticed she had become more of a target for requests, especially from relatives who wanted loans. Sheila had been in an on and off relationship with Marcus Hill, a 45-year-old man she had known for years. Neighbors said they heard arguments between the two. Sheila's relatives said she had recently talked about ending things for good. Despite the tension, Marcus still visited her house often. He said he was helping with moving furniture and packing for the repairs. On June 3rd, Marcus's truck was seen parked outside Sheila's home late in the afternoon. A neighbor remembered seeing him carrying boxes inside earlier that day. Nothing seemed unusual. By early evening, Sheila's relatives began arriving to help with packing. Around 7:30 p.m., they knocked on the front door, but it was locked. They could hear shouting inside between Sheila and Marcus. One relative later told police they banged on the door and called her name, but he would not let them in. Moments later, neighbors saw Marcus rush out the front door. His shirt was stained with blood and he ran to his truck. One man across the street said he looked panicked, like he was trying to get out fast. He slammed the driver's side door and drove off quickly down the street. Sheila's relatives forced their way into the home. In the living room, they found her on the floor with multiple stab wounds. One relative immediately called 911, asking for paramedics. Another ran to a neighbor's house for help. Police operators received several frantic calls within minutes, reporting both the stabbing and Marcus's escape. Officers and paramedics arrived quickly. Inside, they confirmed Sheila had no pulse. She was declared dead at the scene. Bloodstains marked the living room floor. The knife used in the attack was found thrown away near an overturned box. Meanwhile, deputies spotted Marcus's truck speeding away from the area. A short chase followed through nearby roads until he lost control and crashed into a ditch. Officers pulled him from the vehicle and placed him under arrest. He was taken into custody without further problems. The next morning, news of Sheila's death spread through Macon. Her funeral was held later that week with co-workers, neighbors, and relatives filling the small church. Her children spoke briefly about how she had worked her whole life and only recently had financial security. Investigators confirmed that Marcus had stabbed Sheila during an argument. Detectives said financial stress and relationship problems likely played a role, with relatives reporting ongoing disputes about her winnings. The house remained empty for months with boarded windows. Sheila Grant's story became another warning that even in one's own home, the fortune of a lottery ticket can end in violence. It was September 17, 2018, in Newark, New Jersey. Evening came over a row of attached homes with brick fronts. In one row house near the corner, neighbors knew the place had been under repair for months. The home belonged to Elaine Matthews, a 61-year-old retired librarian. In February, she won $200,000 in the state lottery. She did not want attention and told only a few relatives. She used the money to update her house and sometimes bought meals for neighbors. But she did not show off or talk about the prize. Word still spread. Her sister often mentioned the win at church and on the block, saying Elaine was lucky now and could fix her house and help family. That talk reached beyond close friends. A barber heard it from a customer. A store clerk heard it twice in one afternoon. Two men near the corner store learned that the librarian on the block had cash at home. On the night of September 17th, Elaine was at home when a neighbor saw two hooded men stop near her gate. The men rushed up the steps. The neighbor heard wood crack as the front door was pushed inward and called 911. Inside, the intruders shouted for money. A witness in the next house later told police she heard a woman say to, "Please just take it." The hall was narrow, and the staircase went up along the wall. During the struggle near the top of the stairs, Elaine was pushed and fell the full flight down. She hit the lower landing. A heavy sound shook the wall next door. The men searched through the front room, pulled open drawers, and took two bags. One had household cash and receipts. Another had small electronics. The neighbor on the porch watched the men run from the house and cross the street. He said they wore dark hooded clothes and gloves. He also noticed one man carrying a bag with a paint spot on the side. This detail later matched a bag missing from Elaine's hallway. He told the 911 operator which direction they ran and gave descriptions by height and clothing. Paramedics and police arrived within minutes. Officers cleared the first floor and called up the staircase to check for other people. The medics found Elaine at the bottom of the stairs, lying face down with no movement. They turned her carefully and checked for a pulse and breathing. They put a neck collar on her. She had a deep head wound and signs of head injury. Medics gave her oxygen, stopped the bleeding, and moved her to a stretcher. She was put into the ambulance and taken to the nearest trauma hospital. At the hospital, a team met the ambulance at the entrance. She was taken to a treatment room for scans and evaluation. Despite efforts, her condition did not get better. Elaine was declared dead later that night. The medical report said blunt force head injuries from a fall downstairs during an assault. Police put tape around the front of the row house and began asking questions. Investigators took photos of the broken door frame, took fingerprints from a light switch, and collected a broken screw from the door lock area. Detectives got camera footage from a store and a bus stop at the corner. A video clip showed two hooded figures running away just after the time of the 911 call. Another clip caught part of a face when one man lowered his hood near a streetlight. News of the break-in moved fast on the block. Her funeral was held at a small church in Newark a few days later. Detectives made progress within weeks. A patrol officer stopped a man carrying a bag that matched the neighbor's description. Fingerprints matched a known criminal. One suspect was arrested while police searched for the second. Detectives confirmed the men had learned of Elaine's winnings through talk at a nearby corner store. Police warned residents to be careful about discussing sudden money. For the people on that street, the memory stayed clear. The sound of a door breaking, two men running into the dark, and a quiet house with tape across the steps. Elaine Matthews kept her win private. The talk that spread was not hers. It was enough for two strangers to choose her home and a fall down a narrow staircase to decide the rest. It was May 12, 2015 in Dayton, Ohio. The streets were empty after dark with only a few cars on the main road. At a corner gas station, the lights were on and pumps were bright against the night. For most people, this was just another evening trip, but for one man, it would be his last time there. Kenneth Harris, called Ken, was 49 years old and worked night shifts at a plastics factory. He was reliable and steady, almost never missing work. In March, Ken won $250,000 from a lottery ticket. He used the money to pay bills, buy a used truck, and help his sister with her house. People noticed he seemed happier but was not careful about his good luck, carrying more cash and showing off his new truck at places like the gas station he visited often. That night, just before 9:40 p.m., Ken drove into the parking lot. The security cameras recorded him getting out of his truck and walking inside the store. The station was busy. A few cars were parked near the gas pumps. One customer stood inside by the food shelves. Ken went to the counter. He talked with the worker while he paid for beer and some tickets. The man by the food shelves looked at him several times. Then that man walked toward the door. Another man followed close behind him. The cameras showed they seemed to wait until Ken was finished. Then they went out the door after him. Outside, the parking lot had lights but also had dark areas near the edges. Ken walked back toward his truck. People who saw what happened later told police they saw two men come close to Ken as he reached for his keys. One man told Ken to give him his wallet. A customer at Gas Pump 3 heard Ken say he had worked for his money before he tried to push past the men. During the fight, one of the men took out a pocket knife. Ken got stabbed in the chest. The knife went in deep, hitting close to his heart. He fell back against his truck, blood getting on the door, then dropped to the ground. The whole thing happened very quickly. Both men who attacked him ran toward the street. One of them dropped a glove as they ran away into the dark. Inside the gas station, things became confused and busy. The worker who had been watching through the window turned off the gas pumps right away and called 911. Several customers ran to help Ken. One person took off his jacket and pressed it against the wound. Another person gave directions to the emergency operator. They could see Ken was bleeding heavily. Ken could not speak clearly. Police officers came within 4 minutes. One officer put a special bandage on Ken's chest wound, while another moved people away so paramedics could help. They gave Ken oxygen, put needles in his arm, and rushed him to the ambulance. While driving to the hospital, Ken's blood pressure dropped and his breathing became weak. The wound had caused internal bleeding, likely damaging his heart or major blood vessels. By the time they reached the hospital, his heart had stopped. Doctors attempted resuscitation, but the damage was too severe. He was pronounced dead before 10:45 p.m. News of the killing spread fast in Dayton. At Ken's funeral, co-workers and family gathered, with many saying the prize money was never really enjoyed. His sister thanked people for their support. Police reviewed security videos and confirmed the attackers had followed Ken outside. Within weeks, 2 suspects with prior robbery records were arrested. Police warned that sudden wealth often brings the wrong kind of attention and told winners not to show cash in public. Ken Harris's story showed how quickly good luck could change. What started as a normal stop for beer and tickets ended with his death at a neighborhood gas station. It was March 15, 2017, when Vanessa Clay's relentless need to dominate every interaction would finally catch up with her in the most horrific way imaginable. Vanessa, a 42-year-old pharmaceutical sales manager from Columbus, Ohio, had built her entire identity around intimidating service workers and demanding special treatment wherever she went. Standing 5 feet 6 inches tall with perfectly styled blonde hair, she carried herself with an air of superiority that made everyone around her uncomfortable. Her weapon of choice was her expensive Hermes scarf, which she wore like a badge of honor while berating minimum wage employees. That Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa had already terrorized 3 different establishments. She made a teenage Starbucks barista cry over Fomart, got a McDonald's employee written up for allegedly slow service, and screamed at a Target cashier for refusing her expired coupon. Each confrontation was live-streamed to her 5,000 social media followers who encouraged her toxic behavior. At Westfield Shopping Center, Vanessa arrived at the jewelry store demanding a $300 return without a receipt. When the clerk politely explained store policy, Vanessa exploded into her signature tirade, adjusting her designer scarf dramatically while filming the interaction. The young employee called security guard Marcus Williams, a 28-year-old father of 2 who had dealt with difficult customers before, but never anyone quite like Vanessa. As Vanessa descended the escalator, she spotted Marcus below and immediately began her assault. Leaning over the handrail while maintaining her live stream, she screamed about incompetent employees and threatened to have everyone fired. Her need to gesture dramatically while filming and carrying multiple shopping bags created a perfect storm of reckless behavior. The Hermes scarf that Vanessa used as her symbol of superiority began dancing in the air as she waved her arms aggressively. In her rage-fueled tunnel vision, she failed to notice the fabric drifting toward the escalator's side panel mechanism. The moving machinery caught the silk material and began pulling it tight around her neck. For 45 agonizing seconds, security cameras captured Vanessa clawing desperately at the scarf that was now strangling her. The same hands she had used moments before to point accusingly at employees were now fighting for her life. Other passengers screamed and frantically searched for the emergency stop button, but it was too late. The escalator's relentless mechanical force compressed Vanessa's cervical vertebrae while completely obstructing her airway. Her 140-pound frame went limp as the designer accessory she had worn to intimidate others became the instrument of her death. Emergency responders arrived 8 minutes later, but Vanessa Clay was already gone. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The woman who had spent years using her status symbols to terrorize service workers had been killed by the very scarf she wore to establish dominance. Her final live stream, still recording as paramedics worked, captured her last entitled demands before the fatal accident. Marcus Williams, the security guard she had been screaming at, required months of counseling to cope with watching someone die while cursing his name. The incident went viral, but instead of sympathy, millions of viewers mocked Vanessa's entitled behavior with comments like "Play Karen games, win Karen prizes." Vanessa's family attempted to sue them all, but security footage clearly showed her reckless behavior directly caused the accident. The case was dismissed, and Westfield implemented new safety protocols including loose clothing warnings and additional emergency stops on all escalators. The tragedy became a cautionary tale about how toxic entitlement can have deadly consequences, with Vanessa Clay's name becoming synonymous with the ultimate Karen karma. It was August 3, 2018, when Jillian Frost's corporate entitlement would send her plummeting to her death in a Denver parking garage. Jillian, a 38-year-old HR director standing 5 feet 4 inches tall, had spent her career wielding power over employees like a weapon. She drove a pristine white BMW SUV that she used to intimidate anyone she deemed beneath her social status, always carrying business cards listing her corporate title to establish dominance over service workers. That Tuesday morning had already been a disaster for Jillian. After being denied a promotion she felt entitled to, she embarked on a revenge shopping spree to soothe her wounded ego. She had already screamed at a gas station attendant over pump speed, demanded a subway manager fire an employee over sandwich assembly, and posted Instagram stories mocking what she called incompetent minimum wage workers. At the Target parking garage, Jillian's entitled rage reached a boiling point. She spent 20 minutes aggressively honking at families and elderly shoppers while filming them through her windshield. Her social media followers ate up her content titled "Teaching Parking Lot Etiquette to Peasants," encouraging her increasingly toxic behavior. When Jillian spotted the Martinez family loading groceries, she immediately pulled behind them and began laying on her horn. The family included 78-year-old grandmother Maria Martinez, who moved slowly with her walker due to arthritis. This fueled Jillian's impatience as she filmed while screaming about important people having jobs to get to. Unable to contain her corporate Karen rage, Jillian exploded from her vehicle like a woman possessed. She began her signature intimidation routine, stepping backward onto the concrete safety barrier to gain height advantage while filming and threatening to have the entire family arrested for obstruction. The 42-inch concrete barrier had been weakened by recent construction work, though it appeared solid. As Jillian gestured wildly while maintaining her confrontational stance, the compromised structure couldn't support her aggressive movements. Her 135-pound frame, combined with violent gesturing, caused the barrier to give way completely. Jillian plummeted 35 feet headfirst onto the asphalt below, her designer heels flying off during the fall. The impact was devastating. Her skull fractured in multiple places while her spine severed at the C2 vertebrae. Brain matter scattered across the pavement as her body went into immediate cardiac arrest. The Martinez family watched in horror as the woman terrorizing them just seconds before lay motionless in a growing pool of blood. Maria Martinez, despite being the target of Jillian's final tirade, called 911 with shaking hands. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but Jillian was gone. Her phone, still clutched in her death grip, contained the final video of her entitled behavior causing her demise, showing her stepping onto the barrier while screaming threats before capturing her fatal fall. The parking garage was immediately closed for inspection, revealing multiple safety violations. Target faced a $2.3 million OSHA fine, though reduced when investigators determined Jillian's reckless behavior contributed significantly to the barrier failure. Online reactions were overwhelmingly unsympathetic. Comments flooded social media with phrases like, "She literally died mad about a parking space," and "Corporate Karen meets concrete reality." Her employer quietly restructured their HR department after her history of workplace bullying emerged during the investigation. The Martinez family, traumatized by witnessing the death, received counseling and a settlement. Grandmother Maria developed severe anxiety about public spaces, forever haunted by being someone's final victim before their demise. Jillian Frost's death became a cautionary tale, proving that gravity doesn't care about your corporate title or entitled attitude. It was June 22, 2016, when Whitney Collins's obsession with authority and viral fame would crush her to death at a Phoenix McDonald's drive-thru. Whitney, a 35-year-old middle school vice principal standing 5 feet 5 inches tall, had built her identity around wielding power over teenagers and service workers. Her red Honda Civic was equipped with phone mounts for filming confrontations, and she carried laminated credentials to intimidate anyone who questioned her authority. Whitney's vice principal Karen TikTok account boasted 8,000 followers who consumed her daily content of berating fast food workers and retail employees. She had perfected using her educational position as a weapon, constantly reminding people that she'd dealt with lying teenagers and knew insubordination. That Tuesday morning had been productive for Whitney's content creation. She had suspended 3 students for attitude problems, filmed herself screaming at a parent who questioned her methods, and posted about teaching respect to the next generation and their enabling parents. Whitney was infamous at this burger joint's location, having previously gotten 2 teenage employees fired by filming them and demanding corporate action. Her signature move involved exiting her vehicle during drive-thru disputes to intimidate young workers while live streaming. When 17-year-old employee Jake Martinez informed Whitney that the ice cream machine was broken, she launched into her tirade about being a school administrator who dealt with lying teenagers daily. Her followers commented encouragement as she began her escalation routine. Unable to contain her need for dramatic content, Whitney exited her Honda Civic while leaving it in drive, live streaming as she approached the menu board. She began pounding on the structure while screaming about incompetence and threatening to shut down the establishment. To intimidate Jake and capture better footage, Whitney began violently shaking the 200-pound electronic menu board support pole. The structure had been loosened by Arizona windstorms, but Whitney was too focused on her performance to notice the dangerous swaying. The menu board couldn't withstand Whitney's assault and began toppling toward her as she continued filming. In her final moments, she was screaming blame at Jake when the metal structure struck her across the back with devastating force. Whitney was crushed between the falling menu board and her slowly rolling Honda Civic. Her spine snapped instantly while her ribcage collapsed under the weight. Internal organs ruptured as 200 pounds of metal compressed her 125-pound frame against the bumper. Her phone captured every horrific second as she was pinned and crushed. The footage showed her final accusatory stare at Jake, still trying to blame the teenager as her life ended. Jake Martinez quit immediately and required therapy for survivor's guilt, haunted by Whitney's final moments of blaming him. The school district investigated Whitney's conduct, revealing inappropriate interactions with students and parents documented on social media. Whitney Collins' death became the ultimate cautionary tale about Karen culture and deadly consequences of entitled behavior, proving viral fame isn't worth dying for. It was November 11, 2015, when Aaron Lockhart's elitist entitlement would trigger a deadly stampede at a Seattle Whole Foods that would crush her beneath the very people she despised. Aaron, a 44-year-old luxury real estate agent standing 5 feet 7 inches tall with platinum blonde hair, had built her career around exclusivity and looking down on anyone she deemed unworthy. She drove a white Mercedes and carried business cards listing her million-dollar sales to establish superiority over common folk. Aaron specialized in policing who belonged in upscale spaces, having previously gotten families removed from restaurants and demanding stores create premium customer lines. Her Instagram showcased her lifestyle while mocking poor people, accumulating followers who encouraged her classist behavior. That Black Friday morning had been productive for Aaron's superiority complex. She had posted stories ridiculing Target families, demanded a Starbucks barista be fired, and live-streamed herself lecturing a pregnant woman about shopping etiquette. After champagne brunch, Aaron arrived at Whole Foods emboldened by alcohol and social media encouragement. She had boasted about educating peasants about their place, carrying her phone to document confrontations for devoted followers. Aaron's signature tactic involved physically blocking customers she deemed unworthy from accessing premium products while filming encounters. She used her height, designer clothes, and condescending tone to make families feel unwelcome in her territory. When the Rodriguez family approached the last organic turkey, Aaron swooped in like a predator. She began her tirade about being a premium customer while filming the family, particularly targeting the elderly grandmother who moved slowly and spoke limited English. Unable to accept that common people deserved the same products, Aaron physically grabbed the turkey while screaming about organic standards. When Mrs. Rodriguez maintained her grip, Aaron's entitled rage reached dangerous levels. In her fury to wrestle the turkey away while filming, Aaron made aggressive backward movements near the olive oil display. Her designer heels and alcohol-impaired balance made her increasingly erratic as she refused releasing either turkey or phone. Aaron's violent struggling caused her to fall backward into stacked olive oil bottles, creating a devastating domino effect. Glass exploded as multiple shelving units collapsed, the sound echoing like gunshots. Panicked shoppers, thinking they were under attack, rushed toward exits in a human stampede. Aaron lay trapped beneath fallen shelving and broken glass as terrified customers trampled over her during their desperate escape. The 140-pound agent suffered severe carotid artery lacerations from shattered glass, while sustaining massive skull trauma from falling canned goods. Approximately 15 customers stepped on her body, crushing her ribcage and puncturing her lungs. Aaron's final moments were spent clutching the organic turkey she died fighting for, her blood mixing with olive oil on the floor. Her phone continued recording the chaos she created, capturing her own death. Paramedics found Aaron in cardiac arrest with massive blood loss. 20 minutes of resuscitation failed as she had lost too much blood from her severed artery. Security footage showing Aaron's entitled behavior causing the stampede went viral. Online reactions were brutal, with comments flooding social media mocking her death over groceries. 3 customers required hospitalization for stampede injuries. The Rodriguez family received death threats from Aaron's followers until accounts were deactivated, requiring police protection. Whole Foods implemented crowd control measures and reinforced shelving. Aaron's firm discovered her history of discriminating against clients, leading to investigations and her name being removed from properties. Aaron Lockhart's death became a cautionary tale about how classist entitlement can have deadly consequences. It was July 4, 2019, when Natalia Brooks' obsession with neighborhood control would send her drowning to the bottom of a Miami pool during what should have been a patriotic celebration. Natalia, a 39-year-old homeowners association president, standing 5 feet 3 inches tall, had transformed her HOA position into a personal dictatorship. She drove a white golf cart equipped with cameras and citation books, patrolling the neighborhood like a military commander, enforcing martial law on suburban families. Natalia's Facebook group, Violation Reporting, had over 200 members who encouraged her surveillance tactics. She had installed security cameras to monitor neighbors and was notorious for filming residents during private moments, posting footage online with rants about property values. That Independence Day morning had been productive for Natalia's authoritarian agenda. She had issued citations for excessive patriotic decorations, filmed families for noise violations involving children playing, and posted Facebook rants about inconsiderate neighbors destroying property values. After consuming wine while patrolling, Natalia spotted cars at the Johnson family's pool party. Her alcohol-fueled authority kicked into overdrive as she began filming while screaming about unauthorized gatherings and parking violations. Natalia's signature tactic involved walking backward while maintaining aggressive eye contact during confrontations, a psychological dominance play perfected through years of neighborhood harassment. This move had intimidated dozens of residents into submission. Arriving at the pool party in business attire with her clipboard, Natalia crashed through the gate, screaming about illegal gatherings while filming terrified children and families trying to enjoy their holiday. Unable to contain her HOA authority complex, Natalia began confronting guests about parking. She walked backward along the pool's edge to maintain her intimidating stare while screaming about running the neighborhood and demanding respect. To establish maximum dominance, Natalia stepped onto the decorative stone coping surrounding the pool. The stones had become slippery from splashing water, but Natalia was too focused on her power performance to notice the dangerous surface. As Natalia gestured wildly with her clipboard while walking backward, her business heels lost traction on the wet stone. Her 130-pound frame tumbled backward into the 8-foot deep end, still wearing her heavy business suit and leather shoes. The waterlogged clothing immediately dragged Natalia downward as she thrashed frantically. Her clipboard floated beside her as she struggled desperately, unable to swim and weighed down by her authority costume that became a death trap. Party guests initially thought Natalia was staging another dramatic confrontation. By the time they realized the situation was genuine, she had been underwater for over 3 minutes. Natalia suffered drowning-induced cardiac arrest as pool water filled her lungs. Her final moments were spent clawing at the water while her clipboard sank beside her, the symbol of her tyranny becoming waterlogged evidence. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but Natalia was dead at the pool bottom. Her body was recovered, still clutching HOA violation forms, the papers she used to terrorize neighbors now dissolved into illegible pulp. The community's reaction was notably unsympathetic, with neighbors privately expressing relief. The Johnson family faced no consequences as the party was within the ordinances and Natalia had been trespassing. Natalia's HOA position was dissolved, and the neighborhood association was restructured to prevent future harassment. Her Facebook group was deactivated after members began celebrating her death. The incident led to statewide HOA reforms limiting president's authority. Natalia Brooks's death became a cautionary tale about how power-hungry behavior can literally drag you under. It was September 8, 2018, when Danica Wells' road rage obsession would send her SUV flipping through the air at 75 miles per hour on Interstate 75 in Atlanta, Georgia. Danica, a 41-year-old corporate compliance officer standing 5 feet 6 inches tall, had weaponized her enforcement authority into a personal crusade against anyone who challenged her rules. Her black SUV was equipped with dash cams, custom horns, and compliance officer decals that justified her highway vigilante behavior. Danica specialized in policing other drivers like subordinates, having received 3 citations for aggressive driving while filming motorists for violations. Her LinkedIn showcased posts about holding people accountable and teaching respect to insubordinate individuals. That Friday morning had been productive for Danica's power complex. She had fired 2 employees, posted rants about teaching respect to workers, and was taking prescription stimulants without medical supervision, amplifying her aggressive personality. Danica's signature highway intimidation involved pulling alongside vehicles to scream at drivers while maintaining high speeds, using her corporate authority to justify dangerous confrontations. She believed her compliance position gave her jurisdiction over every driver. When a compact Honda merged in front of her SUV during rush hour, Danica launched into her highway tirade. She began aggressively tailgating while honking and flashing high beams, filming the alleged violation for social media content. Unable to contain her enforcement obsession, Danica pulled alongside the Honda at 75 miles per hour and began screaming through her window about proper merging procedures. She swerved dangerously close while gesturing wildly, trying to force them off the road. Danica's need to maintain her confrontational filming stance created tunnel vision. She became consumed with punishing the other driver, focusing entirely on her power trip rather than highway safety. Traffic ahead had stopped for construction work, with orange cones and concrete barriers clearly visible. But Danica was too obsessed with her enforcement performance to notice the dangerous situation developing. Maintaining 75 miles per hour while screaming about teaching driving lessons, Danica's SUV struck the concrete construction barrier with devastating force. The impact launched her 4,000-pound vehicle into the air, causing it to flip 3 times before crashing upside down. Danica's body was thrown around the interior during the violent flipping sequence. Her spine severed at multiple points while her skull fractured against the roof. Internal organs ruptured from deceleration forces as twisted metal crushed her 140-pound frame. Emergency responders found Danica's SUV destroyed and her body lifeless in the wreckage. Her dashcam footage captured every moment of her final road rage incident, showing her aggressive behavior directly causing the fatal crash. The driver she had been harassing provided witness testimony describing Danica's escalating aggression. Despite being traumatized by witnessing her death, they required counseling for survivor's guilt. Danica's dashcam footage went viral when released by authorities, showing her screaming threats while ignoring traffic safety. Online reactions were unsympathetic, with comments like "Compliance Karen couldn't comply with driving laws" flooding social media. Her employer faced scrutiny when Danica's history of abusing authority emerged. The company implemented mandatory anger management training for compliance officers and reformed enforcement policies. Danica Wells died trying to enforce rules on others while ignoring them herself, proving concrete barriers don't care about corporate authority. If these horrific Karen deaths left you speechless, prepare yourself for what's coming next. It was May 19, 2016. The sun was setting over Shanghai, casting shadows between the tall buildings. 60 floors up, the wind blew hard through the gaps, shaking anything that wasn't tied down. Far below, the Huangpu River moved steadily, with cargo ships making their way along its path. Xin Wei, 26, stood on the rooftop of a residential tower, setting up his phone on a tripod. By day, he worked as a warehouse forklift operator, but online, he was known for climbing high-rise rooftops without safety gear. His videos, posted to a small but loyal audience, showed him walking narrow ledges and scaling building exteriors, relying only on balance and nerve. This building was the tallest he had attempted so far and the most dangerous. For weeks, Xin had studied the site. He noted when security patrols passed, which doors were locked, and how the wind behaved at that height. His usual climbing partners refused to join him this time. They said the conditions were too risky. Sustained winds of 30 miles per hour, with gusts over 40. Xin decided to go alone. The climb to the roof took nearly an hour. He moved through service stairwells and maintenance corridors, keeping out of sight of security cameras. In his backpack, he carried only his phone, a tripod, and a bottle of water. No ropes, no harness, nothing to stop a fall. On the rooftop, the wind was stronger than expected, Shin positioned his tripod on a flat section near the inner platform and framed his shot. He wanted the camera to capture him walking across an 8-inch wide ledge that wrapped around the building, with the Shanghai skyline in the background. The concrete ledge was smooth and worn from years of exposure, giving his sneakers little traction. He started his walk with his arms out for balance. The first 20 feet went smoothly, his movement steady despite the wind. Then he came to a break in the ledge, an 18-inch gap where two sections of concrete didn't meet. To continue, he had to jump. Shin crouched slightly, took a breath, and pushed off. Mid-jump, a strong gust hit him from the side. His right foot missed the landing, skimming the edge instead of planting firmly. His body pitched forward toward the open air. He managed to grab the edge with both hands, his body hanging over the 60-story drop. For a few seconds, he held on, but the smooth surface and the sweat on his palms made his grip weak. The camera kept recording as his fingers slipped. He fell out of frame, hitting the paved loading area at the base of the building seconds later. A security guard stationed nearby ran to the scene and called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but the injuries from the fall were instantly fatal. Pieces of his phone lay scattered nearby. The memory card, still intact, contained the footage of his final climb, footage his friends later decided not to share publicly. Local authorities used his death to warn others about the dangers of rooftop climbing, pointing out that one wrong step at those heights leaves no room for recovery. It was August 7th, 2017. The waters off Dahab sparkled in the morning sun. From the rocky shore, gulls flew overhead while the heat warmed the limestone. Just a short distance from land, the reef suddenly dropped into the Blue Hole, a deep, vertical sinkhole that went far beyond safe diving limits. It had already claimed over 130 lives, making it one of the most dangerous dive spots in the world. Maria Phillip floated at the surface above the dark opening, adjusting the strap of her GoPro headset. At 29, she was a Spanish travel vlogger whose channel had built a steady audience through videos about food markets and scenic coasts. Recently, she had shifted to more daring content, cliff jumps, parasailing, and now free diving to grow her viewership. This was meant to be her biggest stunt yet, a solo dive through the Blue Hole's underwater arch, 184 feet below the surface. Her cousin, Mateo, waited nearby wearing basic snorkel gear. He had no formal rescue training, but he agreed to act as surface support. In the days before the dive, Maria practiced in shallow water with local instructors, never going deeper than 60 feet. Attempting the arch would mean tripling that depth, well beyond her experience. The risks of the Blue Hole were widely known. The arch's entrance sat deep in the vertical shaft, opening into the open sea through a long, horizontal tunnel. At that depth, oxygen levels dropped quickly, and without a safety line or backup divers, any mistake could prove fatal. Local professionals had warned her repeatedly not to try it without proper technical training and a team in place. Maria decided to go ahead. The conditions that morning were near perfect: calm water, minimal current, and visibility stretching over 150 feet. She took 3 deep breaths, then tipped forward into a streamlined dive. Her GoPro recorded every second as she kicked steadily downward, sunlight fading above her and the arch's pale outline slowly coming into view. At 100 feet, she was already deeper than she had ever gone before. Her descent slowed, her movements slightly less controlled. By 150 feet, the footage showed her alignment wavering, a sign, experts later said, of oxygen deprivation setting in. She reached the entrance to the arch and hesitated for just a second before pushing forward into the tunnel. Inside the arch, the confined space made turning back difficult. At that depth, she was in what divers call the blackout zone, where hypoxia can strike without warning. Halfway through the tunnel, her legs stopped kicking. Her body went limp as hypoxic blackout took hold, cutting off her ability to breathe or move. On the surface, Mateo checked his watch. Her dive time had already passed the limit they had discussed. He scanned the water and then signaled to 2 technical divers preparing for their own descent. They immediately dropped into the Blue Hole, following the arch into open water. They found Maria floating motionless inside the tunnel. The divers pulled her out, ascending slowly to avoid decompression issues, but they knew time was against them. She was brought to shore, where paramedics tried resuscitation for nearly 20 minutes without success. She had been underwater too long. Maria's GoPro was recovered and reviewed by her family. The footage clearly showed the smooth descent, the hesitation at the arch, and the blackout, they chose not to release it publicly. Her death was another entry in the Blue Hole's long list of tragedies, underscoring what diving professionals had warned for years. Extreme depth-free diving without proper training and a safety crew is a gamble that leaves no room for error, no matter how calm the water appears or how perfect the conditions seem. It was August 14, 2016, in Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve, and the morning air was cool and still. The first light spread across the plains in soft, muted colors. Mist lingered in the tall grass before the sun began to clear it. In the distance, hippos could be heard from the Mara River, and hornbills moved between scattered acacia trees. David Peterson adjusted his telephoto lens, scanning the savannah. At 34, the delivery driver from Manchester ran a small but growing YouTube channel focused on close encounters with dangerous wildlife. His uploads mixed narrated clips and raw footage, attracting thousands of subscribers. His trip to Kenya was his most ambitious yet. He promoted it heavily on his channel and social pages, promising real-time footage of Africa's Big Five. The Masai Mara, with its open plains and high predator density, offered the kind of encounters that could draw major attention. His rented 4x4 carried cameras, live stream gear, spare batteries, and tripods, all geared toward capturing the perfect shot. That morning had already been productive. He had live-streamed elephants wading at a waterhole, giraffes feeding from tall acacia branches, and antelope crossing open grassland. His audience reacted instantly, sending waves of comments and likes. But as he drove along a dirt track, a pride of lions under a marula tree caught his attention. 3 lionesses and 2 cubs lay in the shade about 130 feet from the road. Their tawny coats blended into the grass so well that they were hard to spot at first glance. Several tourist vehicles were already parked nearby, with visitors taking photos from inside their cars. The rules in predator zones were clear. No one was allowed to leave their vehicle. Rangers repeated the warning often, reminding tourists that lions were fast, powerful, and unpredictable. David knew the rules, but also knew that his followers responded to close-up, unusual perspectives. From inside the vehicle, he could only get a standard shot. If he got out and moved closer, he could film from ground level, making it look like he was right there with the pride. He stepped out quietly, crouched low, and began moving forward through the grass. He stopped about 30 feet closer than before, raised his camera, and adjusted the frame to show the lions with the savannah stretching behind them. His live stream continued, and his viewers sent encouraging comments, unaware that he had just entered a dangerous range. One of the lionesses lifted her head and looked directly at him. Her tail flicked slowly, a signal park guides recognize as a warning. Lionesses in the Mara can weigh around 250 pounds and are capable of accelerating to full speed in seconds. She rose to her feet, watching him closely, then launched forward. The charge came fast and silent. She closed the 100-foot distance in roughly 4 seconds. David had only started to stand when she slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. Her jaws locked onto his shoulder, teeth tearing through fabric and into muscle. She dragged him several feet before shifting her grip to his neck. The pressure was enough to end the struggle almost immediately. Tourists in nearby vehicles began shouting and waving to distract the lioness, while others radioed for rangers. The closest patrol arrived about 12 minutes later. By then, the lioness had rejoined the pride, and David's body lay still in the grass. In Manchester, his death was reported briefly as a safari accident. In the Masai Mara, rangers once again stressed the rule that no photograph or live stream is worth stepping out into a predator's reach. It was February 14, 2015, on Iceland's Vatnajökull Glacier. The air was sharp and cold, with temperatures well below freezing. The surface stretched in every direction as a mix of pale blue ice and wind-scoured snow. Beneath the clean, open view lay a network of deep crevasses, some covered by snow bridges that could give way without warning. Jackal Anderson, 31, stood at the edge of a wide plateau, adjusting the straps of his camera bag. From Sweden, he had built a steady Instagram following by posting high-risk travel and outdoor expeditions. His feed featured solo climbs, frozen lake crossings, and remote backcountry treks, images designed to grab attention in a crowded adventure niche. This trip to Iceland was intended as a step up from his previous work. For weeks, he had promoted it on his social media channels, telling viewers he would attempt a solo winter traverse of one of the glacier's most dangerous sections. He brought professional drone gear and planned live updates from the ice, knowing that a dramatic backdrop could mean a significant jump in reach and engagement. When he arrived in Iceland, Jakel spent his first 2 days with a hired glacier guide. The guide showed him marked routes and explained the dangers, unstable snow bridges, deep vertical drops, and fast-changing weather. The advice was clear: stay on known tracks and never travel alone in winter. By the 3rd day, Jakel decided to make the main crossing on his own. The sky was clear, the winds were steady, and the light was good for filming. He set up his drone and began recording, moving slowly across the glacier while narrating for his audience. The footage from above showed him as a small figure moving across a vast expanse of white, with streaks of deep blue ice breaking the surface. As he positioned the drone for a wide-angle shot, Jakel stepped backward to get both himself and the glacier's expanse into frame. The ground looked like solid snow, no different from where he had been walking minutes earlier. In reality, he had moved onto a thin snow bridge stretched across the top of a crevasse. Warm, cold temperature swings in recent days had weakened the layer from below. The surface gave way without warning. Snow collapsed under his heel, and in seconds, he disappeared into the gap. The drop was about 80 feet. His drone caught a brief tilt of the horizon before tumbling down as his controller fell from his hands. 2 hikers, about a quarter-mile away, saw the drone fall and thought they heard a faint yell. They used a satellite phone to call Icelandic emergency services, reporting a possible crevasse fall. The location was remote, and reaching it took nearly an hour. When the rescue team arrived, they found the crevasse opening narrow and unstable. The surrounding snow and ice made it dangerous to stand close, so they anchored ropes several yards away and worked slowly to lower rescuers into the gap. Progress was slow. Each movement had to be checked for ice stability, and the cold was constant. It took roughly 3 hours after arrival for rescuers to reach Jakel. He was found on a small ledge deep in the crevasse, unresponsive. His injuries included severe head trauma from the fall. The sub-zero temperatures had caused rapid hypothermia, and by the time rescuers reached him, his vital signs had stopped. He was pronounced dead before extraction. Authorities concluded the accident was preventable. Jakel had the skill and equipment for filming, but not for navigating glacier hazards without backup. His death became another warning to travelers that even the most spectacular landscapes can turn deadly when safety advice is ignored, especially in Iceland's unpredictable winter conditions. It was November 21, 2013, and the sandstone cliffs of Cape Solander, south of Sydney, stood more than 80 feet above the Pacific, where waves pounded the rock face with unrelenting force. Salt spray carried inland on strong winds, coating the vegetation along the headland. It was a spectacular stretch of coastline, but also one of the most dangerous in Australia. Jasmine Broughton, 24, had been photographing these coastal scenes for years. Living in Sydney's suburbs, she built a small but steadily growing Instagram following of just over 2,000 people, sharing images of beaches, cliff formations, and storm-lit skies. Her account was still modest in size, but recent posts of rough seas and dramatic wave formations had earned her the most engagement she'd ever received. That morning, she brought along her friend Emily, who often assisted her during shoots. Jasmine had borrowed professional-grade equipment from friends to give her photos the quality edge she felt her account needed. The plan was to photograph her standing on the cliffs with massive waves breaking behind her. Weather forecasts had warned of heavy seas, but for Jasmine, that was part of the appeal. In her mind, strong waves and a stormy backdrop would create the kind of images people shared instantly. She was confident she could work around the risks, timing her shots between swells. When they reached Cape Solander, the ocean was already in motion. Large swells rolled in from far offshore, colliding with the cliffs and exploding into columns of spray. The sandstone ledge she chose for her position was slick from constant spray and had been worn smooth by years of erosion. Emily stayed farther back with the tripod, keeping the camera ready. Jasmine stepped closer to the edge, watching for the right timing between the waves and the background. Emily told her to be careful, but the wind made it hard to hear. A large swell rose in the distance, forming a visible wall of water. Emily raised the camera to capture the moment. The first wave hit the base of the cliff, sending water up onto Jasmine's legs. She adjusted her footing to stay balanced, but the wet rock made it unstable. Before she could recover, a second, even stronger wave followed. It struck with enough force to lift her feet off the rock and push her toward the edge. She tried to grab at the sandstone, her hands scraping against its rough surface, but there was nothing secure to hold. In seconds, she disappeared over the cliff and into the turbulent water below. Emily dropped the camera and ran to the edge. The water was a chaotic mix of foam, spray, and surging currents. Farther along the coast, two surfers saw the wave strike and began paddling toward the spot, but the conditions were too rough for them to get close. Emily used her phone to call emergency services, her eyes fixed on the water in case Jasmine surfaced. Lifeguards arrived within minutes with jet skis and rescue boards. For half an hour, they searched through the dangerous surf, diving into channels between rocks and fighting strong currents. Eventually, a lifeguard spotted Jasmine in a narrow rocky channel, tangled in kelp and battered by waves. She was brought ashore in a small cove where paramedics attempted resuscitation, but the injuries from the 80-foot fall combined with prolonged submersion left no chance of survival. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities later used the incident to remind the public about the risks of approaching cliff edges, especially during heavy seas. Emily's camera still contained the last frame taken. Jasmine smiling, hair blown sideways by the wind with a massive wave rising behind her. It was July 2nd, 2014. Mount Elbert, the tallest mountain in Colorado at 14,440 feet, sat under a bright summer sky. The air felt cool and fresh, and the mountains around it looked calm and still. For experienced hikers, mornings like this were normal, good weather early, but often replaced by sudden storms in the afternoon during Colorado's lightning season. Once above the tree line, there was almost no place to hide, and bad weather could hit with little warning. Brian Carter, 37, from the Denver suburbs, was a small but active YouTube creator who ran a channel focused on drone footage of unique locations. With just over 4,000 subscribers, most of them drone hobbyists and outdoor enthusiasts, he had been working to make each video bigger than the last. This time, he wanted something rare, aerial shots from the summit of Colorado's tallest mountain. He had posted teaser clips and community updates to his channel, promising once-in-a-lifetime views from above 14,000 feet. He started late that morning, carrying a small backpack with a GoPro, his drone kit, spare batteries, and some basic food and water. It was enough for a short climb, but light on safety gear for high-altitude conditions. Forecasts had warned of afternoon thunderstorms, and experienced hikers were already on their way down when he began his final push toward the summit. By late morning, he was within half a mile of the top. From the exposed ridge, the surrounding peaks and valleys stretched in all directions. He set up his drone and sent it into the sky, narrating the flight for his viewers as he panned across the sweeping landscape. It was during this flight that the first signs of changing weather appeared. The air felt heavier, and a faint metallic smell lingered, an early warning of nearby lightning. Dark clouds were moving in faster than expected from the west, and thunder began to roll in the distance. Brian stayed focused on getting one last sweeping shot before packing up. As he adjusted the drone's position, a flash lit the sky, and lightning struck a rocky point less than 100 yards from where he stood. The blast was immediate and deafening. The shockwave knocked him off balance on the loose scree near the ridge. His footing gave way and he stumbled backward. The drone camera, still recording, caught a few seconds of rapid movement. The horizon spinning, the ridge rushing past, his outstretched arms trying to grab hold of anything solid. He fell down the steep slope, hitting rocks as he tumbled. His backpack took some of the first impacts, but his head and shoulders struck granite ledges on the way down. Two hikers lower on the mountain saw the lightning strike and spotted movement on the ridge immediately after. They realized someone had fallen and used a satellite phone to contact emergency services, providing GPS coordinates. Search and rescue teams moved quickly, but the incoming storm made conditions dangerous. Lightning continued to strike nearby, and rescuers had to time their movements between flashes. It took nearly an hour to reach Brian. When they arrived, he was unresponsive, with massive head injuries and multiple fractures from the fall. Paramedics confirmed there were no signs of life. His drone was later recovered from higher on the ridge. The footage ended shortly after the lightning flash, showing the jolt, the loss of balance, and the start of the fall. The video never made it to his YouTube audience. Authorities described the death as a reminder of how quickly mountain weather can turn deadly. They stressed that above the tree line in Colorado, Storms can form with little warning, and lightning is one of the most common causes of fatalities. For hikers and content creators alike, the message was the same. Start early, be aware of conditions, and don't push past safe limits for the sake of a shot. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.